Episode 4 of The Wealth Show with Equity Kings. Welcome to The Wealth Show. My name is TUMISHO and I'm accompanied by my co-host Siyabonga Chuma, man. Welcome. It's been a while since we released the latest episode. We released it like 2 weeks ago. Sorry for the inconvenience, guys. But let's just get into it. A lot of things has happened. We got the CPI numbers, just a quick market update. We got the CPI March numbers or May numbers for 2021, and it looked pretty bad. 5% year over year CPI, and month over month is 0.6%. That's a big gain, guys. That's a big gain. Although the previous month it was 0.8% month over month, but then it's still going in this upward trend. It's not transitory as the Fed likes to put it. But we can argue. Some people have good arguments on whether it's transitory or not. But we'll just get into that as the podcast continues. So we see Nasdaq was flat, although it's about to break an all-time high. S&P 500 just did it yesterday, before the Fed's FOMC meeting that we're about to get later on today. This is Wednesday. It's Wednesday the 16th. It's Youth Day in South Africa. I don't know where you are, where you're listening to this podcast, but it's Youth Day in South Africa. So shout out to the youth of South Africa. But that's not what we're here to talk about. And then we see gold. We saw gold yesterday on Tuesday. We saw gold rallying. It was a big jump. It was an extraordinary jump. I think it was trying to precipitate gold's move when the inflation numbers hit. So when the inflation numbers initially hit, gold didn't do anything. It literally just crashed. I don't know why, because I think that the market is trying to tell us that the Fed might taper its asset purchases of treasuries, and they might raise rates, which is obviously dumb because the Fed is not going to raise interest rates. It's impossible. Sia, think about this. How can the Fed raise rates whereas the debt in the economy is so great? Imagine if they just raise rates by 25 basis points, 0.25%. Just a small rate hike, and that'll crash the whole system. Because that's what they tried to do in 2018. If some of you may recall, 2018, 2019, they tried to taper purchases, and then they pushed interest rates to 2%. 200 basis points. And then what happened when they did that? They had to reverse because the repo market spiked up to 10%, and then they had to reverse and start QE again and do QE number 5 or whatever you want to call it. So they won't fight inflation. If this inflation truly is not transitory, they will not fight it. They don't have the tools to fight it. So, Sia, what's your take on this whole inflation argument of some people saying it's transitory, and then like the whole media saying it's transitory? Only a few people in the media not saying it's transitory. I don't think it's transitory, but although there is a good argument for the transitory perspective. So what's your take on it, Sia?
First of all, I'd just like to say, TUMISHO, I feel like you have taken this podcast and inflated it. You've just raised a lot of points so fast that I even couldn't get to introduce myself to the listeners because I wasn't there on the previous episode. But anyways, this is episode 4, guys and girls who are tuning in. And we're about to talk about inflation, of which inflation is really broad. So we are going to branch this conversation from the narrative of, is inflation transitory or not? As the listener, where do you lie between is inflation transitory or not? So in a nutshell, to those who are wondering what exactly is inflation, we could say an increase in prices of goods and services within an economy. Okay? That's the most basic of inflation, rising prices, okay, less buying power. And inflation really goes deep. So to regular people, you might just be like, oh, okay, it affects my food, my transport, my electricity bill, and all that. And then we have other people who really have some longevity in this investing thing, okay, as we mentioned before. Those who think for the future. I'm going to make an example here. Let's say in that 30 years from where you took your investment to that date, if prices and interest rates and inflation remains constant at that fixed ratio, let's say for 2%, okay? Cool, for 2%. And then here's what happens. Over a period of a decade or 10 years, you decide to invest certain capital. So I'm just going to make simple math. So the simple math here is, let's say the inflation rate is at 3%, and now you've got 10,000 for 10 years. Inflation rises to 3%, and then inflation ends up rising to 4%. Cool. And then you're making a 6% gain, okay, full on your portfolio. But due to inflation, you reap 2%, of which is a lot of funds to talk about the least. So which dives into the fact which we want to broaden TUMISHO and I of, is inflation transitory or not? So we're going to play a lot around with the word transitory or not. So as I said, TUMISHO already inflated this podcast. I'd just like him to slow down and then raise the first point, and then we'll take it there. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to welcome myself to the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, so my point is, before I just go on, I stand with the argument that inflation is not transitory, and I'll make my argument. But I must say, in order for us to understand why is it not transitory, we have to understand why people say it's transitory. So here's the argument for inflation being transitory. So one of the reasons is, and I listened to this guy. He's a very, very smart person. I listened to his podcast. So this guy, Jeff Snyder, he's really smart. Like, his mind, he blows my mind away. I mean, his mind is already so huge. He has so much data in his brains. So you know what this guy says? He says inflation is transitory, right? And then he gives the reason that he looked at 10-year treasuries, right? He said, so what happened was 2000, right around the dot-com bubble, what happened was inflation was rising, right? At the same pace as we see today, right? There was 3 times when it was rising at the same pace, or rather 4 times. But in this century, it was 3 times. It was during the dot-com bubble, and then during the great financial crisis, and then now it's the 3rd time, 2020, 2021, post-COVID. So we have this whole thing outplaying us. Understand why is inflation transitory. So the first reason is he looked at treasuries and he saw that, okay, so treasuries started going up, the yield started going up, because when the 10-year yield, that's the interest rate on a government bond, and it's a good indication of whether there'll be inflation or not. So what happened was the yield was supposed to go up during because of the dot-com bubble, but instead
increase in value.
Yes, exactly. It was supposed to do that, but then instead yields fell. And then as the yields fell, people were like, no, we think inflation is not transitory. We're going to ignore the bond market and we're going to listen to the Fed, because the Fed said they were going to try and fight inflation, right? And then what happened was there was no inflation. The inflation was transitory. But I mean, I can argue and say that it was only transitory because at that time, the dot-com bubble burst and then people lost all their money, so they weren't spending anything. So that's why it was transitory, because of the dot-com bubble burst, late 2000, early 2001. Dot-com bubble burst, and then we had a recession, and then Alan Greenspan, the Federal Reserve chairman, dropped rates. He basically did QE. So what happened was, after they did QE, and if you guys listen to our intro episode, we did explain what QE is. I don't want to get into that. So it's when the Fed buys up bonds, government bonds, and they try to suppress rates so that the interest rates can be low and the economy can run smoothly, in their words, which obviously is nonsense. The economy doesn't run smoothly. They're just talking nonsense. So second,
can you hold that thought?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, guys. With an economy, we gotta know for every buyer there's gotta be a seller. So the world we're living in is actually a market. So the way you're gonna view it is there's X and Y person, okay? There's X and Y person, okay? So X is buy and Y is the seller, okay? So here we are. We have a tree. This tree produces 3 apples, okay? Listen carefully to what I'm about to say. I'm about to blow your mind. So this show is about giving you the forbidden knowledge, okay? This is the forbidden knowledge. So I'm just going to make an example with apples, okay? So you've got 3 apples. Cool. You've got 3 apples, right? You've got 3 apples and you've got 10 people within this economy, okay? So now, here's what happens. The government can supply everyone, all these 10 people, with 3 or 6 notes, okay? Just an example. The government can supply people like that. So I want you guys, I hope you're drawing this picture. We have 3 apples, we have 10 people, and then we've got the government, of which the government can give these people 6 notes. Let's just say 6 notes, okay? Cool. The government can give these people 6 notes. Now, here's what happens. Money cannot produce those goods. So now, because there is these 10 people and they've got 6 notes, as the holder of the apples, it's frank to me that there is demand, okay? Because, and where this demand comes from is that people are not working. We can't produce more apples. Everyone wants an apple, but we can't produce more apples. So now we have to price the apple high so that people are not really interested in apples anymore. Of which now you see you've got more money circulation, because when we talk about inflation being transitory, here's what we mean. Let me give you a lifespan of, let's say you were born in 1980 up until recently. I don't think the bread prices ever went down since you were born. I think things like bread, which the government really, like in South Africa, the government really tries to keep stable at all costs for the low class. I think you can measure there that inflation is not transitory, okay? And let me get into interesting numbers of inflation. This is a report by Stats SA. This is the consumer price inflation hits a 14-month high. So in the annual
in South Africa.
In South Africa, yeah.
Yeah.
So it reads like this: annual headline inflation jumped to 4.4% in April from 3.2% in March, mainly driven by rising transport and food prices, due to the fact that the government did not want to pay out the stimulus for the transporting system, because the government said you guys must also shut down. And then the reason they rose the prices so high exponentially, if you ask me, is because the government did not give them their stimulus check, and they decided, oh, now we have to recover. And in order for us to recover, prices are going to go madly high. And lots of people don't even have jobs. So you see how it really created this massive gap in the economy of people working and the cost of things. Even looking at food prices, as I said, bread is like the most basic indicator which you can look at. It always goes up. So which means inflation it changes, and for me, I feel like it always goes up. I've never seen inflation going down.
Yeah.
We
hardly ever see deflations. Yeah, we hardly.
Peter Schiff said this. You don't know how this, like with Bitcoin, when Bitcoin kept going up, like in Tesla, it's just that the bubble keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Nobody knows when it's gonna pop. But here's the thing: when the bubble bursts, then shit's gonna hit the fan.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, Peter Schiff, he did mention, and with your example about bread, or not with bread, with the taxis thing, it's not like after raising prices they're gonna come back down. No, those prices are permanent. It's already up there. They're not gonna drop prices. Are they that dumb? They're not gonna do that. You just have to suffer. That's how it is. That's the whole thing about inflation. I think the people who are saying it's transitory, they're using the definition that inflation is a rise in consumer prices over an extended period of time, over a prolonged period of time. But then that's a stupid explanation, because at the end of the day, when these prices are going up, like CPI going to 5%, South Africa 4 point something percent, that those price increases are permanent. It's not like they're gonna come down as people, like the way the Fed puts the word inflation is transitory. It's like they're saying the prices are gonna go back down. I mean, right now prices can go up 10%. And then even if it's still transitory, quote unquote transitory, it's not like the prices are gonna go back down. They're not gonna do that.
And here's the
stays there. Yeah.
Back on my part of the bubble getting bigger and bigger. Here's the tricky part with how the government needs to handle inflation. The inflation needs to be handled in a manner that, it doesn't skyrocket to the extent which it comes like Venezuela and countries like Zimbabwe. You can't let it escalate up to that high. And the only way to not let it escalate that high is a country that is producing goods and has sufficient jobs for people. Now, it's Youth Day today in South Africa, and then I saw some really terrifying quotes and memes, but otherwise, if you look at it, it's really factual that 7 out of 10 people are not employed in South Africa, which is the youth, and which it's a large number. If you look at it, just means like 80% of the youth in South Africa is unemployed. Now we could make this maybe, let's say, between 20 up to 29. We could use that 20 up to 29. A good chunk of that is unemployed. What is our government doing wrong in times like these where we have COVID? So, Tumisho, I'd just like us to take a twist on this episode, because we're always talking as to the government is doing this, the government is doing that, the government is foolish on doing this. I feel like let's change the narrative of this show today and be like, here's what you and I think the government could do to better the economy, okay? And with the economy,
answer.
Okay, I'm listening.
Here's my answer. Your question was, what can the government do to prevent all of this from happening? Like, this is actually pretty simple. What can the government do to reverse all these problems? They must do absolutely nothing. The problem is they're doing something. Yeah. Can I tell you why? Let me just explain why the problem is that they're actually doing something. Because we have to understand what a government is. A government is a monopoly. As we mentioned in our previous episode, it was titled the Mafia, the government, the mafia. I mentioned that the government is a mafia. I think I took that quote, that analogy from Peter Schiff, because he's the king of analogies. And I can see Sia's also good with analogies, like that Apple analogy we spoke about earlier. But but
Adam and Eve, this is the Forbidden Knowledge channel. Welcome to the World Show. If this is the first time joining us, please subscribe, guys, and show some love and support and push that like button.
Yeah, and I mean, like, what's happening is the government does too much, because all they do is inflate the money supply. Because by definition, inflation is an expansion of the money supply. And then the symptoms of inflation, or the effects of inflation, could be rising prices. It could be, rising consumer prices, rising bond prices, rising whatever prices. But what government is doing is they have so much regulations. I mean, ever since 2005, if I'm not mistaken, from my last knowledge, before Thabo Mbeki left office, what happened was government regulated the banking industry. They went heavy on the banking industry. So therefore, why do you think we only go to 5 banks? There's a big 5 in South Africa, or big 4, whatever the hell it is. But then there's a reason why there's a huge monopoly in the banking sector, and there's only big banks taking over. That's not what a healthy economy is. A healthy economy has to have thousands of banks so that people can compete. Banks can compete for the highest interest rates on their savings. What government does is they create a regulation that says, oh, banks must do this, they must protect their employees. This regulation is to protect the employees. But remember, the cost of complying with regulations is expensive. So therefore, small businesses go out of business and big banks stay alive. And then therefore, they can raise their fees and all those things. Look at things like medical. Yes, I wanted to speak about this here. And I hope I'm not going off the topic, because we spoke about what government can do. Look at medicine or the healthcare sector. Look at the classic example of government interference. And now they're pushing for NHI, National Health Insurance, which is complete, utter nonsense. And our country is not going to benefit from it. So what you have to do is get government out of the way. Let me tell you why. With healthcare, if you look at healthcare, what happened was before apartheid ended in 1994 or 1998 when the real regulations started coming in. Before all these regulations, healthcare was cheap. And then what happened was when government regulates healthcare and does all these insurance policies for citizens and forces people to pay taxes like UIF and all these nonsense things, unemployment insurance and all these insurance things. And you know what's the thing? When you subsidize something, the government always talks about, hey, we're going to subsidize something and give people discounts. When you do that, if you give people discounts, what are private hospitals going to do? They're going to raise prices because more people are coming in, demand and supply. It's not like there's more hospitals that are being built. It's the same amount of hospitals, but there's a huge demand. Therefore, prices have to rise. Then you keep regulating it. And then now, when you get to the point where you keep subsidizing healthcare, the prices have to rise. Same thing with school. So what the government has to do is the government has to get out of healthcare. The government has to get out of education. Therefore, private firms can provide cheap education. Therefore, no one has to go to these government schools. This podcast episode is proudly sponsored by Libertex, arguably one of the biggest forex brokers of the 21st century. Libertex has a wide variety of financial instruments to trade with, from currency pairs, stocks, energies, and even a broader variety of commodities to trade. I personally use Libertex, and the one thing I love the most about this broker is their incredibly low spreads. Libertex has been operating since 1997 and has won over 30 prestigious awards worldwide and is even a sponsor for Tottenham Hotspurs. So click the link in the description to sign up and enjoy the perks that come with trading with a world-class broker.
Welcome back, listeners, from the ad break. So we'll kick off the second segment by starting with the point that if we were the government, what would we do? Such a key question. Or if you were the government, what would you do? You know? As I said, TUMISHO and I are always critiquing as to how the government is doing things, this and that. So I think now it's time that we gave some constructive criticism to our work and come up with the picture that we may see fit. But there is loopholes here and there, but we're just going to give the gist of it as the author. So, first of all, I'll speak for South Africa, okay? Because I once mentioned this on the other episode that I feel that South Africa is a third-party economy. And now you may ask, why are you saying it's a third-party economy? Because I feel that our economy is more reliant on the partnerships that we have with other countries to create jobs in our countries, to increase the standard of living, social welfare, those type of things. So this is what got me thinking. I'm like, in South Africa, we are a mineral-rich country. First of all, we can start by saying we put gold up front. Who has gold has to make the rules. All right? Or the phrase goes like, who has gold makes the rules. So I'm saying we have gold. We have gold. Why don't we make the rules? Okay? Here's what I've got in thought. Okay? So, first of all, I'm going to start by this point. We are a third-party economy because we depend on countries like China for our products, toys, appliances, and most of the things we import them from there, of which when we look at the exchange rate, dollar to the yen, the rand is still weak, but we have gold. Okay, we have gold. Moving on to the second point. Cool. We have countries like the United States who own diamonds in our country. Just to name a few companies, Anglo America, De Beers, those are American companies. Okay, TUMISHO, they are American companies. I know what De Beers is.
Yeah,
Anglo America also, yeah. So
it is.
those are the American companies which they've put their monopoly here. Okay. I just hope my identity sometimes remains hidden. Because, hey, it's about to get hot in here. I hope you're still doing good, listener. So now, here's another thing. We have the finest coal in South Africa. When I mean the finest coal, I mean the finest coal. We supply other countries like New Zealand, America, London. We do supply our A-grade coal. Coal. Sorry, guys. Got that word mixed up. Pardon me. Okay? And then, come to look at it in our country, we have issues like load shedding, but we have coal. We don't own that coal, guys. It's owned by other countries. The elites, the powerful ones. You could take a guess and fill in that blank for me. Okay? So now we have an issue in South Africa where we have load shedding and the economy is trying to recover and we have load shedding. This screws businesses over because it's during the day businesses need electricity to function, to make invoice, to look at the system, to make copies, to make calls, all those things. Funny how even the network disappears, okay? So
and just to interrupt, and I mean this thing about businesses without electricity. If businesses don't have electricity, that's bad economic growth. I mean, economic growth goes down. Is that right? Yeah.
Because it also costs the business more to function because now the business will have an extra expense of having to buy petrol and a generator if they don't have one to try and fill in those gaps. And over time, that amount accumulates on the balance sheet of the company. So now we're going to move on saying, okay, so now I've had a few pointers of what's happening, right? And here's another thing. There was an article that came out back in the years, I don't know, 2016 or what, that we import chicken from America. How pathetic is that? For a country like South Africa, which has good land, we've got good land which is fertile, and where are the skills of agriculture? Topic for another day. Okay, cool. So now I've brought in this picture as to what other countries have monopolized in South Africa, right? Sweet. So now this is the culture that we've been given, culture of taking rules from other countries, because basically they've plugged in their resources which actually belong to us, and then they've given us rules. Okay, going on, we are going to look at Japan. Now, if you are a history student, you are frank of the Nagasaki bombing in Hiroshima, which was deployed by the United States of America. And we could argue, but here's the point I'm going to say, is that the reason the United States of America decided to do that is because they wanted to remove China from the hierarchy of global power. Okay? Because they saw these people have got something going on. Now, maybe I'm sounding like this is a conspiracy, but yeah, we'll be touching on those two.
Nah, it's not even a conspiracy, it's a fact.
No, listen.
China basically wanted to control. I mean, they were on the forefront of all these conflicts and at those times, bruh. Like, they wanted to take over Japan. At the same time, they were supplying North Korea in the Korean War. So there's a lot of things going on. China just wanted power. And the US was like, nah. This isn't going to work for us, you see.
Yeah, okay. So now we're going to move on to that point. So you see, if I'm correct with the date, it happened 1945, right, TUMISHO?
Yeah, 44, I think. 44, just before the end of the war.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Cool. So looking from that, now if we look at Japan and how the people recovered from that, my condolences to what happened. May their souls rest in peace. Let me carry on with my point. Don't disturb the listeners, TUMISHO. So what happened is, if you look at Japan or China, if we see the culture that they had as a people and how they went about recovering. Firstly, they had longer hours, and they decided that they're not a real rich mineral country. They do have those other, what you call metals, ferocious metals, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's the word. They do have those ferocious metals which we use, which you get strictly from Japan or China, which they do have a good niche in the market. But besides that, if we look at the culture of Japan as a country, of what happened from where they were and where the world is at with the country, they've pretty done amazing for themselves. They've done extremely phenomenal compared to all the other nations. So basically, the main point that I'm going to give you, and listen to me carefully, is that China is a country that got into the habit of producing things themselves. I mean, from low quality assembly. I mean, you might argue that it's cheap labor, but they were able to get the skill to invent things. Like, if we check some of like old generation TVs, or some of successful companies at this point in time, like Samsung, one of the best TV manufacturers, like appliances. We've got companies that are old, like Sansui. We've got companies like Toyota. Look at Toyota in South Africa. Taxis, I mean, guys, we've all been in the taxi at some point. And we used, and in South Africa, the number one public transportation is taxis, and those are Toyota taxis. Now, you could say Africa was back in time to have developed this technology, hence we don't have African cars. If ever they are also third-party cars, which originally they belonged to Japan. So, going back to try and summarize these points, is that what South Africa could do, the culture they should endorse, because we have abundant resources. Well, they could be limited, but at this point in time, we have abundant resources. Even our weather is phenomenal. So if the government could take the taxpayers' money, at least they're stealing from people. If they could at least take the taxpayers' money and maybe do it in this narrative, where we come up with ways to make our own machines, or buy other machines manually from Europe, and make final product gold bars, make final product watches, have our own luxurious brands. I mean, we have crocodiles here, but you're gonna get LVs, Lacoste, all those other brands. So you see, we have a lot of resources of which we could refurbish into the originality of the product. But yet again, there's a deep underlying story to that, which is a story for another day. So I feel like what South Africa is lacking to fight inflation, because this episode is all about inflation as we are talking, I feel like what South Africa could do to fight inflation is that the government should make sure that things are actually state-owned rather than selling, because I feel that way the circulation of power will be amongst the country. But yet, we've got too many loopholes.
Yeah.
So over to you, TUMISHO. I hope you got the point, listener. I hope you got the point. If not, I'll take a break next time.
I mean, I get your point, right? So my take from that is, what I'm trying to think through is, so government right now is not doing what it's supposed to do, which is advance the economy, right? Instead, they're trying to build bureaucracy and increase their power and all that nonsense. I didn't want to use the S word. I didn't want to say shit, but I already said it. So, but what the government should do, what I disagree with you. I always knew I was gonna disagree with you on something.
I was waiting for that. Let's go. Pull out your guns.
Yeah, you see, on your last point, you said that government or these things, because you basically said it's a third world country, it's a third party country, and people
economy, not country. Well, they call us third world. I think there's a reason why they call us third world. Why do you think they call us third world for nothing when we have resources? Because they stay.
I think we're in between third world and first world. Yeah.
Yeah, South Africa is in between, but either ways, Africa, third world. I mean, sorry for the stereotype, but yeah, so the third world, meaning it's a third party economy. Whatever's gonna happen within that continent, yeah, because Africa is the poorest continent, bro, compared to other continents. Yeah, and we have the most resources. How ironic is that? And then they call us the third world because it's a third party. Third party meaning that it's your land, your ground, but you play by someone's rules.
Yeah, and you see, I agree with that, right? I think we can all agree it's a third-party country. So the point is, where I disagree is the fact that you said that so government should take our taxes and instead of using it on whatever nonsense they're wasting it on, whatever BS they're trying to do, they should at least put it. You're saying they should put it into things, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is what you said. They should invest it into these things like minerals and whatever, so that we can grow wealth. The wealth is ours. So I think I have to disagree with that, because first of all, government cannot invest in anything because government investment is bad. Central planning is bad. I'll give you one example why government.
Look. The narrative of my government is not that these establishments are going to be free. No. With what my government is going to be doing, this is me hypothetically speaking, is going to be taking this money or this wealth or this funds and making structures within my economy which will raise opportunity. And with opportunity, I know going to raise demand and supply somewhere somehow. I will not have to rely.
You can't.
I will not have to rely on a sheep coming from overseas to deliver goods. I will know that I have people here. Look, okay, carry on with your point. I just want to
let me carry on. Don't interrupt me. Let me just make my point, and then because I think my point is very powerful and you won't dispute it. I'm telling you now, you won't. So, back to my point, why I say government cannot do anything. They can't even invest money. Think about it. We have gold, right? If we needed to sell, if the government, as Sia says, it must be state owned so that the government can use that gold and make money and create opportunities, etc. Except when some central monopoly is doing that, they don't have an incentive to make your life better. They only have an incentive to make things free. Let me give you an example. I'll give you one example. It's a classic example in the 80s, 1865, if I'm not mistaken, or it was before the Civil War, around the 1860s. What happened was the American government, right? What the American government did was they gave, so this is what they do all the time. So what they do is they'll give this guy a contract, right? They want to build railroads, right? So in order to build railroads, they would have to collect money from taxpayers and give it to, let's say, a railroad company or some dude who knows how to build railroads. So the government does that. So you might say this is capitalism. No, it's not. So when government invests in railroads, the guy who is building those railroads from a government contract is not going to build it to his efficiency, because that guy has no competition, and that guy is probably going to make the railroads skew and make the railroads longer, so that because for the government will pay that guy, let's say, for example, for every single what's one rail or whatever, I don't know what a rail is. So for every single rail, the government gives him a fixed amount of money. So this guy has an incentive to make sure that these rails are longer and inefficient, so that the government can keep giving him more money. It's basically corruption wrapped around legal processes.
Look. my system is going to be a smart system. It's not going to be a dumb system. First of all,
but think
listen,
about it like this. Think about it. Why do you think private prisons, right? This is not capitalism at all. Private prisons are prisons that are owned by private sector, right? By the private companies. But the government is the one paying those prisoners. Do you know why the prison business is so profitable? Because if you want to get in the prison business, you just have to make sure many people get crimes, so many people get arrested. Therefore, the government can give you more money because it costs a lot of money for every prisoner. For each prisoner, it probably costs like 100,000 rand a year to house every prisoner. So obviously, you as a businessman, if the government is giving you money, you want to make sure that you have as much prisoners as possible. So you're going to arrest as much people as possible, and you're going to keep costs down by poor services in the prison instead of actual clean services. So you see, it's crony capitalism mixed with government, because government cannot invest. There is no proof of whatever you say, Sia. Whatever you say has no historical proof. So there's nothing that you can compare it to.
Listen, here's the problem of where our conversation is going. I said my points, and now you are finding loopholes and things that I didn't say, but I could say based on the idea that I mentioned. So listen to what I'm going to say to you. Obviously, if I ought to make that economy work, I'd have to sit down with a lot of people, intelligent people, and sit and look at the loopholes. As you are saying, the thing with prison, I'll make sure that in South Africa the legislature says that there cannot be a private prison, so some things will remain controlled. And here's the thing, we cannot say there can never be a government, because that is foolishness. Okay, what we can say is, how can we make a new system that can work? I think we could take it from there.
It can't, Sia. It can't, because if you say no private prison, for example, or no private whatever, and the government has to run it efficiently, in your own words, or apparently efficiently, it's impossible, because the economy has price signals, and those price signals are set by the free market, by free market capitalism, where government
you see, here's your problem.
The only thing government is supposed to do is protect your rights. It's not supposed to create some sort of world that you are proposing. That's not what government is there for. That's why government flops. That's why free market capitalism wins. It's historically proven, Sia. You have to get government out of the way.
Hence you're saying that last point is because you think that you and I'm arguing about socialism and capitalism. No, that's not the nature of this conversation. The nature of this conversation is stipulating things that would work. And as we can say now, as I mentioned in my points, that if you look at Japan, the culture of Japan, and you might argue, I'm going to take out the dictatorship part, but let's look at the culture of how they recovered from where they were, what happened to them, of how they grew and changed over generations, and the things they are doing, and the markets that they are dominating today in this world, in this point in time. I mean, sometimes you could say Tesla's from China. I mean, Tesla does suit being from China, don't you think?
Yeah,
I don't mean
I know.
But okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even with Japan,
So wait,
I mean, look at
this, you would want to argue about a point. I just wanted to end my point by saying I'm not going to argue a lot, but the listeners will argue for me if ever they're on my side. So I'll let them take the side. I want to end this by saying, as I said, because you are disputing about my point of making these infrastructures within my economy so that my people have doors and opportunity to make my system better. So what I'm going to leave you with is, look at Jews. That is the most flourishing nation when it comes to wealth and passing it from generation to generation. Jews. You know what they do? Money stays in the hands of their family. So since South Africa is broad, South Africa as a family, you gotta keep the wealth in South Africa. That's how we're gonna flourish. Because trust me,
keep it in the hands of South Africa.
As you have to listen. Sorry. yeah, I'll let you get your point. As you love to say, unintended consequences. You know, one of the unintended consequences is when these other countries decide and wake up and like, fuck, I don't like my business in SA. Call all those people and tell them, fuck, we're closing down. You know what? We're gonna go into panic mode because now we're so self-reliant. And here's the problem. It's a culture and it's been said. So to undo it, it's really tough. But once you're on the mindset of, fuck, we're self-sufficient. If McDonald's closes down, check, nothing can replace McDonald's. If ever we could have other burger outlets, but McDonald's, that taste, you'll never have it ever again. So hence I'm saying, if ever it's from our country, then we know we call the shots.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it there to the listeners. I hope you got my viewpoint.
Yeah. I think what we can learn from here is, I think one thing that we both agree on is that what government is doing right now is a flop. Although maybe I think I also agree with you on the point that you say that it shouldn't be controlled by other nations. It should only be controlled by people in the nation. I'm just saying that if people in the nation are supposed to hold those things, it shouldn't be the government. That's all I'm saying. But I think you guys, what I'm trying to say is, let's think for ourselves. Let's not look at whatever the narrative is. As you can see, Sia was there. He just thought for himself. He was thinking critically. It's not something you learn in the textbook. It's not like he picked it up from the textbook or anything. Textbooks don't say any of that nonsense because textbooks are nonsense itself. So you guys have to think critically. You guys have to, and you see, as you argue, we brainstorm, because this is what helps. We brainstorm without getting offended. You see, we don't have to get offended. We just have to speak like normal people. And that's what we're trying to get at, you guys. So thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, before you end it, I just like to say this to the listeners, sorry to jump in, is that by the time people realize the conscious things TUMISHO and I spoke about on this podcast, and please make sure to follow us on our social pages and the page of the show. And some people realize the facts and the things we think about in this episode. I hope it's not too late. Please share it with your friend. Would really appreciate that. See you on the next episode.